Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you, as always, to everyone out there for watching, for following, for listening, for subscribing. I appreciate you all very, very much. Today is our Wednesday episode, and this is going to be the Podbag. Last week, it was called something else. Before that, it was called Fan Friday. At some point, I'm going to settle on a name that I'll actually like. This one, pretty simple, the Podbag. And basically what this is the episode where you, the watcher, the listener, you control the narrative. I plucked out some of your questions, some of your takes. I'm going to read them on the show. Some cases, they're going to speak for themselves, and others, I will respond and give you my takes as well. This is going to be something that we do, I don't want to say every single Wednesday, but we will be doing on most Wednesdays. From time to time, I might have a guest, and when I do, this will be the show that gets bumped. But anyway, I'm leaning towards just calling it the Podbag, something nice, something simple. Like I said, where you control the narrative of this show. So that's today. I think Tone Bucks is going to be on the show live late Wednesday night for our Thursday podcast drop. Then live, I know this much, Thursday night, I'm really looking forward to this one. Matt Perino, Buffalo Bills beat reporter, and of course, co-host of The Shout, a Buffalo football podcast, one of my favorite guests. He's been on the show with me many, many times. He's going to be with me, and we're going to be live from Casey's Black Rock on Amherst Street in Black Rock. Don't sleep on this place, folks. Some of the best. I don't want to say the best, but some of the best wings. One of those truly low-key, underrated places to go get some great food, have a beer. The bar looks fantastic. And Matt and I are kind of going into enemy territory, so to speak, because Casey's Black Rock is technically a Kansas City Chiefs backer bar. But anyway, we're going to invade it. Matt and I will have a really good conversation about the Buffalo Bills. The NFL schedule is dropping on Thursday, so we'll have some thoughts on that. Looking forward to that. A good show coming up here with Matt live Thursday night, Casey's Black Rock. And that'll be at 7 p.m., by the way. Real quick, before we get into this show, too. So I've kind of taken a little bit of a beating from a lot of you out there who are watching or listening to this show. Been a little bit the last couple episodes, not gonna lie, man, they've been a little bit on the negative side when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. Not necessarily the whole team, the organization, stuff like that, but more specifically talking about the wide receivers. On Monday's show, I had Joe from Queens with me, and we did kind of an examination of the Bills wide receiver room and how it compared to its peers around the league. And spoiler alert, if you didn't watch or listen to that show, not well. I think I had the Bills out of 6 tiers. I had the wide receiver room right now in the 5th tier. And again, it wasn't to suggest that the Bills offense stinks or that the team stinks. I just don't think the wide receiver room is on the same level as most teams around the league. So anyway, that was on Monday's show. And then yesterday, I had a show with Anthony Marino, and we were talking about just this offense changing, generally speaking. And, I kind of felt even in the moment, and Anthony, who is a very optimistic dude, who does a great job of kind of keeping me, the overreactor, the knee-jerk reactor, more level-headed. But I could kind of feel yesterday's episode getting away from me a little bit, kind of pushing it a little, maybe too negative towards some aspects of the Buffalo Bills offense. Again, more specifically, the wide receiver room, and maybe to an extent, expressing concern that Sean McDermott is trying to kind of reel Josh Allen in maybe a little bit too much. Like, is he the right quarterback for what Sean McDermott wants his offense to be? Anyway, took a a beating with some comments from fans. Look, I'm the only thing I'm going to say is this. In my defense, is when I get behind this microphone, I'm a Bills fan, okay? Most Bills content creators out there, most podcasts you see, especially non-mainstream media, Bills-related podcasts, they're fans. And I really don't think I'm different. But when I get behind this microphone, when I get in front of that camera, the fandom goes out the window, at least for the taping of that show. I'm always going to be honest. I'm always going to say objectively, at least what I feel is objective anyway, what I feel in my mind about this team, certain players, certain positions, certain scenarios, certain circumstances. And I know that's not always going to jive with a lot of fans out there to just choose, and nothing wrong with choosing to be this way, but you just choose to be a lot more optimistic about everything. I'm just not that way, not on this show. And I get it. At times I might come off as a hater. It's not my intention. I promise you, it's not my intention. But at times I'm going to speak negatively of this football team because there's something going on with this team or a player or whatever that I don't like. And I'm not going to sit here and record episodes and lie to myself and lie to you and tell you things that I don't really believe because all I care about is getting likes on the YouTube channel for the algorithm. By the way, I do. So like the podcast, on YouTube, subscribe, hit the comment button, all that stuff. It does help with the algorithm. I get that. But I'm not doing this show just for likes. Like I'm not tweeting out stuff just to get likes on Twitter X. I'm just going to be honest and objective and tell you what at least is my truth anyway. So I know it comes with the territory and I'm going to get some, I don't even want to say trolls because some criticism is very honest and warranted. I said it. I kind of felt yesterday's show a little bit getting away from myself, getting a little bit too negative. But anyway, it is what it is. But just I wanted to put it out there. When I do this podcast, when I do this show, I am going to be honest with my own feelings and my own takes. And I hope you enjoy them, but I understand in some cases, especially the most optimistic of Bills fans out there or Sabres fans, whoever it may be, that you're not going to be feeling what I'm saying. But anyway, I just want to put that out there. On that note, let's get into this pod bag. I got like about 12, 13 questions, mostly Bills stuff that I'm going to get into. Let's start with @SmashPhysical. It says, word is that the Bills liked Claypool in his draft year. Not sure how true that is. What is true is that if Claypool is going to resurrect his career, the Bills are the team to do it with. I expect McDermott and Bean probably had a long conversation with him prior to making the move to sign him, and that the character and leadership in our locker room may be the thing that was missing for Claypool in his previous stops. Obviously, he will still have to do the work and be a solid teammate, but if he does, we may have unearthed 1,000-yard per season monster. And again, that is from Smash Physical. Thanks for the take. Thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. I'm just going to say this right off the top. I mean, I think you're being significantly over optimistic, my guy. 1,000-yard per season monster. That is really optimistic. I'm going to repeat what I've said the last couple days. I would consider it a far bigger surprise if Chase Claypool's on the field for the Buffalo Bills in week 1 than I would saying him getting 1,000 yards, just not even in like kind of my realm, at least not right now. That said, I will say you made a couple good points. You said if Chase Claypool is going to resurrect his career, the Bills are the team to do it with. That I do agree with. What Chase Claypool does walk into right now is opportunity. I mean, if he's being signed and the Bills' intention is to give him a legitimate, completely objective, fair look to wipe the slate clean, let him come to camp and compete for a roster spot, this is the team to do it. The opportunity is there. The Bills have 3 established, well, I don't even want to call Keon Coleman an established receiver, but he's on this team. He's a top 3 receiver. Samuel, Shakir, Keon Coleman, that's your top 3 right there for sure. If the Bills don't make any other moves, that's definitely your top 3. And I think Matt Collins is pretty solidified as the number 4. He's done some good things in the past, good special teams player, pretty good run blocker. So I think your top 4 is set. This team's definitely keeping 5 receivers for sure, and quite possibly 6. So there is an opportunity here to make this team. And then you want to talk about resurrecting your career. I mean, you're going to a team that has an elite quarterback. So the opportunity's there and the right quarterback is there. If you want to be a Chase Claypool excuse maker, he had his good start in Pittsburgh. He went to Chicago and they had crap at quarterback. And then last year he came to Miami mid-season. You could say, oh, he didn't really know the offense, yada, yada, yada. If you want to make up kind of excuses for him. But yeah, sure. The Bills are the right team for him to resurrect his career. Like, you got to feel if he can't, this wide receiver room's not very good. And if he can't crack this roster, if you can't beat out KJ Hamler, the guy they just signed from Detroit, Shavers, Justin Shorter, these guys at the low end of the roster, Andy Isabella, if you can't beat them out, maybe it's time to think about hanging up the cleats. He said, I expect McDermott and Bean to have a long conversation with him prior to making a move. Sure. I'm sure that he did too. You did bring up character and leadership in the locker room that he was missing in his previous stops. I'm not going to sit here and say the Bills don't have leadership and character in the locker room, because they do, but they're going to be looking for that themselves. That's going to be a big part of the 2024 season for the Buffalo Bills right now, because they've lost a lot of that leadership. They've lost a lot of that character. They got rid of it. Financially, most of it anyway, financially, but guys like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and Tre White, Mitch Morse, huge leaders on this football team, all gone. Gabe Davis, not an old player, but he was a captain on this team. Obviously, his teammates, the staff, felt high enough on him to be a captain. And say what you will about Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs, captain too. Anyway, all those guys are gone. So I think the Bills are going to be searching for their own leadership right now. That's, again, not to say it's not there. I do think it's there, and they'll emerge. But in terms of finding the leadership there, but yeah, 1,000 yards per season. I don't see it, my guy. That is incredibly optimistic. I'm not going to sit here and regurgitate how I feel about Chase Claypool. I hate the signing. I hated it last Friday. I don't like it anymore today, because I think signing him prevents the Bills, or maybe doesn't prevent them, but maybe it stops them or discourages them for going out and signing someone else that I think could have been better for the situation. Zay Jones is out there right now. MVS, I'm not really high on MVS, but he's got a better ceiling to me on this football team specifically than Chase Claypool does. So there's guys out there that the Bills are not going to probably sign now because they brought in Claypool. And like I talked about on yesterday's show, every single rep that Chase Claypool is getting right now is taking a rep away from Justin Shorter or Shavers or somebody out there. Now, maybe I'm making too big of a deal of it. Anthony kind of accused me of that on the show yesterday. A lot of fans got on me over that. And maybe you're right. And maybe I'll be wrong about Chase Claypool. It wouldn't be the first time in my life I'm wrong. I just don't have any confidence in him whatsoever. The fact that the Chicago Bears gave up a second-round pick to get this guy and then couldn't get rid of him fast enough, the fact that he went to Miami, an explosive offense where he could just kind of ease in and have to, have a big target on his back, and they had zero interest in re-signing him this offseason, tells you a lot about the guy as things stand right now. But anyway, thank you for that. Let's continue. Claude Stefan says, I also think last year was a revelation. McDermott had a defense that wasn't healthy, but his offense could keep them off the field for large segments of the game, meaning all his defense had to do was make a play or two and turn the game. Every move leads me to believe it's ball control. Thanks for that. Yeah, sure. Ball control is something. It's not nothing. Sean McDermott wants more ball control. And as boring as it may be, limiting Josh Allen's turnovers or turnover-worthy plays is smart coaching. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not appealing. You want your quarterback to chuck the ball all over the place, especially when it's Josh Allen, because he's going to make some plays that pretty much no one else can. But what comes with the territory. A couple ugly turnovers here and there, mistakes. So, I don't completely hate on what Sean McDermott's philosophy probably is, which we don't really know that for sure because, I've sat here and I've said, his team defense, Sean McDermott defense, Sean McDermott hates offense, Sean McDermott hates throwing the football. Well, we all know that Sean McDermott has a huge voice in that front office. We all know that Sean McDermott has a huge voice in the Bills' war room when it comes to the draft. And not one, but the last 2 years in a row, the Bills have used their first pick in the draft to take a pass catcher. Kincaid last year, Keon Coleman this year. So that's not really accurate, but sure. Look, you're a head coach. You want to run the football. You want to control the clock. You want to keep your defense fresher. I get all that. You want to limit your quarterback's turnover-worthy plays. I don't really know that that's a criticism. I mean, there's things that I like to criticize that I think Sean McDermott deserves to get criticized over. I think he was too conservative times. I think his timeout management is terrible. I think in certain situations, his game management is terrible. His defense last year, at least, for the first maybe half to 65% of the season, the defense was awful at closing out games. So there's things to criticize Sean about, but honestly, kind of wanting to control the football, win time of possession, keep the defense off the field, be a little safer with your quarterback so he's not turning the ball over. I can't really hate, so to speak, on that. One more, then we'll get to a break here. At PitDog27 says, I think we are going to stress defense with our running game. Having big wide receivers that can block gives us an advantage when teams play two high safeties against us. I have a feeling our offense is going to be really good this season, and defenses will have a lot of trouble matching up. Maybe. I mean, I think one thing is obvious. This is an offense. The Bills' offense is in transition right now. I'm not going to sit here in May of 2024 and say the offense has regressed or that it's going to regress because we don't know that. But it is definitely in transition. The plan seems quite obvious at this point. You go back a couple of years ago, and it was Stefon Diggs and John Brown and Cole Beasley, chuck the ball all over the field. Smaller running back with Devin Singletary, although a stronger runner than given credit for, but he was really good in small spaces. But this was a more wide open, quickness, separation, kind of hope for the explosive plays type of offense. That's what this was. Now it's more bigger, physical, methodical. At least that's the way it feels, right? I mean, you do bring in Curtis Samuel, who has really good speed, and he can break big plays. But sure, you go get Keon Coleman, a bigger-bodied, good run blocker, catches the ball in traffic, but he's not really a 50 yards down the field type of guy. You're going to bombs away type of guy. Matt Collins, bigger guy. And then you look at the offensive line, what they're doing. I think that was kind of obvious. So, we all assume that Mitch Morse getting cut this year was 100% about the cap and about money. And I know that played a big role. Maybe not a big role, played a role. Because here's my point. I think there's a philosophy where the Bills wanted to get physically bigger in the interior of the offensive line. And by taking Connor McGovern from guard, who's much bigger than Mitch Morse, and putting him at center, and now I got Edwards. It's seemingly Edwards who's going to be the starting guard, especially after the draft, because the Bills didn't really do anything at that position. It certainly seems like the Bills are looking to get bigger and more physical. So you got the bigger-bodied physical receivers. You got Connor McGovern going to center. They use a 4th-round pick on Ray Davis, who's kind of almost like a bowling ball, really good in between the tackles. Physical runner. I mean, he's got other traits too. He's really good in the passing game, good at screens, making people miss. But he's a bigger, physical running back. And then, of course, you got Josh Allen. So, sure, I think this is definitely an offense right now that's in transition. And we are seeing a trend where defenses, including the Bills, are going smaller and smaller and smaller. They want to match up smaller linebackers, that can cover tight ends or in some cases help with, slot receivers and running backs out of the backfield. You want to be more athletic and stuff like that. But when you get smaller, how do you combat that? You get bigger and you get physical. It seems to me that would be what the Bills' offensive philosophy is right now. We don't know that for sure, but it sure seems to be right now. Let's get bigger, more methodical, and we're going to be more physical and dominate the line of scrimmage with football teams. Anyway, let's take a real quick break, come back on the other side. I got a solid handful more of these questions, mostly Bills, but a few others too. So be right back. All right, we are back here. And again, this is the Podbag, the episode where you control the narrative. I'm going to keep this rolling here. Mr. Ghostface85 says, hold on, Mr. Moran. I've heard you rail against Ed Oliver for his lack of production in the playoffs, but you wanted Stefon Diggs for one more year? In the last 3 playoff elimination games, Diggs has only 10 catches for 63 yards and doesn't even command double coverage from teams like the Chiefs. Diggs is the epitome of a regular season stat stuffer and dropped what would have been the catch of his career. Okay, well, the one thing you're definitely wrong about, what would that drop that he had against the Chiefs would not have been the catch of his career. Not even close, man. He caught one of the more memorable passes for a touchdown in NFL history with the Vikings against the Saints, a catch and run for a touchdown in the playoffs at the end of the game, literally won the game for them in 2018. That said, I'm gonna be honest with you. Your point's not lost on me. You are right about a lot. It's gotten me thinking since I saw this comment. It's got me thinking. So for people who don't know, I was pro trade Stefon Diggs when it happened on April 3rd. The Bills got a 2nd round pick in 2025. My mindset at that time was, and I've talked about it on the show, so I don't want to regurgitate this too much, but my mindset was, that's a chess piece. That's a chess move by Bean. They're up to something bigger. Because we all knew, even before Stefon Diggs got traded, we knew the Bills were going to take a wide receiver early in the draft, which they did. First pick of the 2nd round. But we already knew that was coming, even when Stefon Diggs was a Buffalo Bill. To me, I thought that it was a chess move where the Bills were going to make a trade for a receiver around the league because we knew the cap situation wasn't great. Or, worst case, come like June 1st, they were going to find a way, maybe sign Odell Beckham Jr. They were going to do something at wide receiver besides only draft would turn out to be Keon Coleman, which they would have done anyway. I mean, they had to replace Gabe Davis too, right? So I went from being very pro trade Stefon Diggs to after this draft, and especially after Chase Claypool signed, I was like, if you're only going to draft one guy in the draft and you're only going to sign Chase Claypool, shit, you may as well have just kept Stefon Diggs for one more year. Work it out, whatever the bullshit is going on behind closed doors, which was a lot, of course, but find a way to make it work. One more year. Go to the dude. Tell Stefon right to his face, if you're Brandon Beane, listen, you ain't going nowhere this year. We can't do it. $31 million cap hit, dead cap money this year. You got to stay here another year. I'll tell you what, though, Stefon, get through this year, put up a great season, and we will cut you or trade you to wherever you want to go after the season, which would have been a little bit easier of an out for the Bills financially, in a way. As it turns out, they're just saying, screw it, eating all the money now. And now come next year, they're off the books with Stefon Diggs, which for them, for the Bills in 2025, that's great. But my point was, once it was just Coleman and Chase Claypool and the dude from Detroit who got suspended for a year from gambling, Cephas, I'm like, yo, you should have just found a way to make it work with Stefon for one more year. So anyway, that was what I was railing on pretty much over the last couple of days. But to your point, I have talked about this a lot, and you're right. You're right, Mr. Ghostface 85. You're right. I've railed about Ed Oliver choking in the playoffs. I've called it a face plant. In fact, I remember doing an episode when the Bills lost to the Chiefs this year. I said, you know what? Josh Allen played every bit as good as Pat Mahomes. The Bills lost that game because the Chiefs, complimentary superstars, Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, they played like superstars when it matters. Conversely, the Bills, alternate superstars, Stefon Diggs, Ed Oliver, they don't do shit in the playoffs, not elimination games. They stink. And they did. Stefon Diggs stunk against the Chiefs. Ed Oliver stunk against the Chiefs. Ed Oliver stunk against the Bengals last year. Stefon Diggs didn't do anything against the Bengals last year either. So you're right. It's a good point. And through all this madness that's been going on with the wide receivers, I kind of lost sight of that. Got me thinking. I'm back to being good with Stefon Diggs being gone because, sure, he might catch maybe not 100 balls this year, but he might catch 75 to 90. But when you need him in the playoffs, where's he been? And I know it sounds like a personal attack and kicking somebody when he's already out the door, but it is what it is. Go look up the numbers. Stefon Diggs has not been good in the playoffs for the Bills, just like Ed Oliver has not been good in the playoffs for the Bills. So you can be a star player all you want during the regular season, but you got to be one when it matters most. So anyway, a very fair point. At Bills Mafia experience, getting sick of the window is closed bullshit. If Aaron Rodgers was winning MVPs in his late 30s and Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl at 40, then Josh Allen's second half of his prime hasn't even started, and his prime will be the next decade. Don't care for the mainstream sports media talking points. You know, the usual mentioning all the names who've left, many of whom weren't contributing or in decline, were overpaid, overrated, and in Diggs' case, a cancer to the team. All right, well, you know, it's a good point. Very good point. Josh Allen is still young. Josh Allen conceivably could still be one of the top 2 to 5 quarterbacks in the NFL for years to come. That is conceivable. It's not just conceivable, it's realistic. It's what he is right now. And we don't see anything to suggest that that's not going to be the case for, you know, some time to come. You know, guys who weren't, another point that I think is well made is I hate saying the Bills lost big name players, Poyer, Hyde, Tre, Morse. And you mentioned a point that you're right about. You know, they're overpaid. I don't want to say overrated because that's not true. They weren't overrated, but they were in decline. These were not the same players. That wasn't Micah Hyde. 2023 Micah Hyde is not the Micah Hyde that we saw, you know, for 3 or 4 years previous to that. I thought Jordan Poyer still was a pretty damn good player, but he wasn't quite that all-pro player he still was. Of course, we know what happened with Tre. Mitch Morse was all right. He was pretty good. But yeah, these weren't the same players that were, you know, around here a couple of years ago. And calling Diggs a cancer, I mean, look, we all have our opinions. We don't know that for sure. It's not just entirely Stefon Diggs. He's not the villain in this story all by himself. There's beefs that he had, issues that he had with Josh Allen, where I guarantee you Stefon Diggs has a lot of fair points. There's issues that Stefon Diggs had with Sean McDermott. In some cases, where I guarantee you Stefon Diggs has a lot of fair points. Maybe other people in the front office as well. So it's not just Stefon Diggs is a cancer and leave it at that. Because then it makes it sound like he's around a bunch of good guys who are doing everything the right way, making all the right decisions, but it's all Stefon's fault. Not true. But anyway, in terms of the window being closed, I agree with you. It's certainly not closed. Come on. It's not closed. But to say that it's as open right now as it's ever been, or if it's been the last 3 years too, I don't agree with that right now. Right now, I don't. I just don't. You know, you look at the team, I've talked about this, the last 3 years, it feels like the Bills' opportunity to get to a Super Bowl, if not win one, it was there on a silver platter 3 straight years. I mean, you go back to 2021, the Bills are on the road in Kansas City, divisional round. You're up, 13 seconds left. That game should have been a wrap. And then you got the Bengals at home the following week. That felt like a Super Bowl year. 2022, You survive all the crazy shit, the injuries, DeMar Hamlin, all this stuff. You win a wild card round game. You got the Bengals at home. Cincinnati Bengals team, by the way, a lot of people forget this, that was missing 3 of their 5 starters on the offensive line and a defensive back. What more could you ask for? A home game against a team that's offensive line is decimated. And the Bills went out and got their asses whooped that day. Should have won that. And if they do win that, they don't even got to go on the road for the championship because the game against Kansas City would have been in a neutral field, I believe it was Atlanta. And then this past year, you're home. You got a Kansas City Chiefs team that was the weakest it's probably been in, at least offensively for sure, 3 or 4 years. You're winning most of that game and you find a way to lose. You're winning a lot of that game. So you blew it. 3 straight years, the Buffalo Bills have blown it in the playoffs. Just no excuses. There's no excuse to blow a lead with 13 seconds. There's no excuse to lose at home to a team that's got 60% of their offensive line out of the game. And then there's no excuse to lose at home against the Chiefs last year. When you finally get them in your building, you're winning most of the game and the Chiefs offense is just not that good and you still lose. So that window was about as open as it's going to get, for now at least anyway. I don't think the window's shut for this year. I certainly don't think it's shut going forward because look, you can deny it if you want. The Bills want to win the Super Bowl this year. They're not packing it in. They're not mailing it in by any means. But it's not even debatable. If you're trying to say the Bills are all in this year, you're crazy. You're crazy because their actions, not the words, their actions speak otherwise. They traded their best receiver for an asset for next year. They had a draft. They had an opportunity to maybe package that asset to go get somebody who could help them this year, and they didn't. They traded a draft pick this year for next year. They made moves to set them up for the salary cap for next year. And so we're clear, this isn't really a criticism. I'm just laying out facts. The Bills next year are going to be in really good cap shape. They just got Stefon Diggs off their books. Probably almost certainly going to cut Von Miller. And they got a shitload of draft picks. So they're set up well for next year. You can talk about that window being wide open again next year. It's open right now, but I don't know that it's wide open for this year. They're in a tough conference, and this is not going to be, well, I shouldn't say it's not. This doesn't have the looks right now of a football team that's going to be as good or better than they've been over the last few years. Guys are going to have to step up. A lot of things are going to have to fall into place. They can, but sure. The window is certainly not closed. The Bills can win the Super Bowl this year. No question about it. But I don't think it's as wide open as it's been the last 3 years. And I don't think it's as wide open as it'll be, hopefully, for the next 3 more after the season. I'm going to pick up the pace here. I'm going to get through the last few of these. At MazVids, one of my favorite YouTube guys who's always commenting on the videos. Appreciate him. He watches the videos, uses always leaves insightful comments. He says, I like this one too. I'm looking specifically at the development of Dorian Williams. With the style of defense that Buffalo plays now with these smaller matchup linebackers, it's inevitable that they are going to get hurt and miss time, especially if they play against teams that like to run the ball. If Williams can make the jump in year 2, it will go a long way in ensuring that we don't find ourselves in the painful position we were in last season. McDermott doesn't only have a long history of developing secondary players, but his track record of producing elite linebackers stretches all the way back to his days in Carolina. I'd argue that his linebacker track record is even more impressive than that of safety and corner. All right, MazVids, thanks for that. Sure. And I'm all in for any situation that doesn't ever force me to have to see AJ Klein trying to cover Travis Kelce ever again. I think the Bills this offseason defensively for sure have went matchup hunting. They signed Nick Morrow. They took that linebacker from Penn State, a speedster, a fast guy in round 5. Dorian Williams is a player that I do think has really good potential. Cole Bishop, a safety in the second round, a guy who could cover tight ends. It feels like that Kansas City loss this past season kind of changed, I think, what the Bills may be looking to do in certain situations because the defensive tackle depth sucked last year, right? Let's just be real. It was terrible. And that has been a major priority this offseason to upgrade that depth. Austin Johnson, they traded down in this draft in part to pick up a third rounder so they could get Dwayne Carter. So that defensive tackle depth is better. And now you got Morrow. Again, you got the rookie for Penn State. You got Dorian Williams going into year 2, which I ain't going to sleep on him. I slept on Terrell Bernard a year ago. I ain't going to do that this time around. So sure, if injuries inevitably happen and when you have a smaller defense, smaller guys, to Maz's point, that's going to happen. Depth matters a lot at those positions. So I agree with you, man. That's a really good take on Dorian Williams. At Lord Butlet, 65-20. The only quarterback in NFL history with 4 consecutive 40-plus touchdown seasons. Let me repeat that. The only, and this is him, with parries at the end of each word, the only quarterback ever in the history of the NFL. 40-plus total touchdowns. He says he can't do it himself. Our defense lost more games than he did. All right, well, thanks for that. At Josh God, 54-12. It's hard to say if Diggs declined. To me, it looked like he gave up on his team. The amount of effort on many of the drops was laughable. Not necessarily talking about the long ball drops. Coupling his drama with the timing of the decline makes me think he will be back to his old self in Houston for a while, at least until he realizes he will no longer lead the league in targets. Well, I think Stefon Diggs already knows he's not going to lead the league in targets. Not going to Houston, Texas right now. Look, you can say a lot of negative shit about Stefon Diggs, and to some extent, I have. But don't think he gave up on his team. He didn't give up on his team. His effort is always super high. That dude puts in work, man. At times I don't, he was all in to win a championship. I'm going to say that. He wanted, part of the reason why Stefon Diggs came across as such a dick to a lot of people is because he didn't care about anything else except winning a Super Bowl here in Buffalo. I truly believe that too. He was all in. So, that said, I get why they got rid of him. It was an issue. It was an issue with the quarterback, the relationship. It was an issue with the head coach, the relationship, the money going on in decline, maybe having a different philosophical, view of what your offense, what you want it to be going forward. I certainly see why they got rid of him. But the one thing I will not do is sit here and talk about Stefon Diggs having a lack of effort, because that I simply don't believe that. Bills Mafia experience. I've been a diehard Bills fan since the 80s. As a teenager, we have been razor's edge close to making the Super Bowl, and only Reed, Mahomes, and the Chiefs have stopped us barely. They were very fortunate, something our Bills have never been, lucky. In 2022, the nonstop tragedy and cancer growing within Diggs held us up. Other than that, we're the next best team, better than the Ravens, Niners, etc. There's no one closer to Kansas City than us as a team. I'm going to say the same thing I just said, man. I get it. I get Stefon Diggs as being the easy scapegoat for everything right now. But the Bills falling short the last 3 years was a hell of a lot more than Stefon Diggs. You can argue he's been one of the least problems in terms of the reasons why they fell short. Injuries were a factor. Coaching's a factor. Other star players not stepping up, etc. Remains to be seen. Again, it's May. Who am I to say that the Bills are better or worse than the Ravens or the 49ers, Texans, any of these other teams? I will say it's going to be a dogfight in the AFC. It's going to be a fight, man. The Bills, we'll see what they are this year, but there's some good teams in the AFC. And the Chiefs offense kind of sucked last year, still won the Super Bowl, and they're making moves to rectify that. I mean, they get Hollywood Brown. They draft Xavier Worthy. They look like they're going to be faster and more explosive at receiver yet again. Last few here. Vengeance 7,000 for a defensive centric team like the Bills. They sure have terrible scouting defensive line with the amount of picks blown on the defensive line. No, they don't. You see, I know, and this comes, and trust me, I deal with it every week. Joe from Queens, who's on my show most Sunday nights with me, there's nothing more in the world he hates than the Bills sinking their resources into the defensive line. A, because he's an offensive guy, and B, because he just simply thinks that defense hasn't worked for the Bills. The Bills have not, at least, I mean, this comment was in reference to draft picks. It's not true. Since 2017, McDermott was the coach in 2017, and we can argue about who was really in charge of the draft, yada, yada. Who cares? But from 2017 on, which is over the last 8 years, in the first 5 rounds of the draft, the only players that get drafted during that span, rounds 1 through 5, Harrison Phillips was a 3rd rounder in 2018. He was pretty good. Ed Oliver, a 1st rounder in 2019. He's been more than pretty good. He's been good. I don't think he's a top 10 player. And again, I have issues with the way he played in the playoffs, but I'm not going to sit here and bash Ed Oliver as a draft pick. He's been really good for the Bills for the most part. A.J. Epinesa was a 2nd rounder in 2020. Greg Rizzo, a 1st rounder in 2021. He's been really good. Boogie Basham, 2nd rounder 2021. He was a bust. And I think maybe because we just think of Boogie Basham all the time with the defensive line, it's easy to just say, we draft too many of these guys and they suck. Well, Boogie Basham is the only one out of these guys who was nothing. And then this year, he hasn't even played he hasn't even went to camp yet, but the Bills sunk a 3rd rounder into Dwayne Carter. So that's just 6 guys total over the last 8 years, rounds 1 through 5. Now, unrestricted free agency, that's another thing. Daquan Jones, Leonard Floyd, Von Miller, which, by the way, Von Miller, I'm never going to bash Brandon Beane for taking that swing, because if he doesn't tear his ACL, Von Miller still was one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. But they've had their misses: Settle, Poona Ford, Star Latulele, Vernon Butler, Mario Addison. So, sure, man, a lot of guys that stunk. And, if you're pro offense and you don't want to spend the money on defense, I get it. But you can't really accuse them of drafting too many defensive lines, because that's just not the case. Appreciate the comment, though. Steven GM14. Give me a Bills player no one is talking about that could be a surprise breakout guy this coming season. Kind of like Terrell Bernard became last year. Sorry to lose my voice here. By the way, doing these solo episodes, I don't do them often. I usually have a guest, but yapping for 40 to 50 straight minutes on your own, I don't know how some of these solo podcast artists, how you guys do it. It's crazy. Anyway, it's a great question, Steven. I reserve the right to change my mind, but right now, as things stand, I'm going to go to the position we talk about all the time. How about Justin Shorter? 6'4", 238 pounds, and he spent last year on IR. We don't know what he is right now. All we saw basically was training camp. What are you really going to see from a rookie in training camp that's going to swing you one way or another? He was a 5th round pick. The Bills drafted him top 150, and it just seems like nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, a lot of people don't even consider this guy when we're talking about, well, how could this receiving room get better? Like, why are we writing this kid off before we even see what he can really do? The opportunity's there for sure for him to be something. And then I look at it like Brandon Beane and the Buffalo Bills, they got a really good track record when it comes to day 3 picks. Khalil Shakir, fellow receiver, taken in the 5th round. Christian Benford in the 6th. Gabe Davis, a 4th round pick. Dane Jackson, a 7th round pick. Teron Johnson, a 4th round pick. Saran Neal, 5th rounder. Damar Hamlin in the 6th. Matt Milano, although, again, you can argue what regime took him, but bottom line, he was a 5th round pick in 2017. So right now, given his physical stature, given the position being kind of sort of a weakness right now, I'll go with Justin Shorter. At Michael Andrew 83, I was more happy about Lindy Ruff than the Bills draft. We know the Bills would be good. I want the Sabres to be good finally. Good take, man. I really don't got nothing to add. Join the club, man. We all want the Sabres to be good. You know, I've seen on social media over the past week, like this has been the anniversary of some really good playoff runs. I remember the one where Chris Story scored near the end to tie the game in Ottawa, and they just show it when we're watching the videos and memories. Fans just losing their minds in the arena, outside, partying in the plaza. For so many young people, it's hard to even remember those days. I mean, it's been 13 years since the Sabres even made the playoffs. Man, oh man, that would be great to get back. So yeah, sure. We all want the Sabres to be good. Finally. Last question. Is this the last question? Yeah, it is. At Billsboard23. He says, Facebook birthday wishes is exactly where social or where society started to fall apart. All right, real quick for a little context here as we get out. My birthday was on Monday, and I put up a tweet, and I also put it on Facebook. I don't know what I said word for word, but it was actually funny. And I kind of alluded to the fact where people go on Facebook and they say, thank you everyone for the birthday wishes. I truly appreciate it, yada, yada, yada. What they're really saying is, all right, you didn't wish me happy birthday yet on Facebook. So I'm kind of giving you an out here. I'm giving you a second chance before I ultimately hold it against you. That was kind of the joke. I mean, it is a joke, but it's also true. People do that shit. They're like, yo, my cousin didn't wish me, happy birthday on Facebook or my friend or whatever. So you put it up there, you thank everybody, and it gives them kind of like a second chance. So that's what his comment is in regards to. Anyway, all right, on that note, I got to get out of here. I got nothing left, man. I'm out of gas. I do thank you, as always, again, for watching, for listening. I hate plugging stuff. I hate asking people to do stuff because I know if you enjoy the show, you're just going to do it anyway. But in this case, I'm going to. Audio side, we continue to grow. Spotify, Apple. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you go and you follow us. And then, of course, on the YouTube side, which, man, lots of new people on the YouTube side. I love it. If you're watching this video, make sure you hit that like button, you leave a comment, subscribe. And then for these future pod bags, leave a comment on YouTube, tweet at me. You can email talkingbuffalopodcast@gmail.com. And that's how we will feature your comment on an upcoming show. And then one more time, I'm going to be live Thursday night, Casey's Black Rock Tavern, 7 p.m. Matt Perino is going to join me. That's going to be awesome. Thank you again one more time. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Talk to you then.